Most people never notice the moment they lose control over themselves. There is no dramatic collapse, no single mistake that exposes it. It happens quietly, a small compromise here, a moment of indulgence there, a habit that feels harmless, a distraction that feels deserved. And slowly, without resistance, the mind learns something dangerous, that it does not need to obey you anymore. This is the real psychological cost of living without self-restraint. Not failure, not weakness, but loss of command. When restraint disappears, life does not fall apart immediately. It becomes noisy, scattered, restless. You still function. You still work, you still smile, but internally, something fundamental has shifted. Your impulses begin to speak louder than your intentions, and that is where the damage begins. Self-restraint is not a moral concept. It is not about denial, purity, or discipline for its own sake. Psychologically, self-restraint is the mechanism that allows the conscious mind to remain in charge. Without it, behavior becomes reactive, attention becomes fragmented, and identity slowly dissolves into habit. The brain is not designed to resist pleasure indefinitely. It is designed to follow reinforcement. Every time you give in to an impulse without resistance, the brain learns a simple lesson. This action leads to relief or pleasure. Repeat it. Over time, this repetition strengthens neural pathways that bypass reflection and decision-making. What was once a choice becomes an automatic response. And that is when self-restraint stops feeling optional, because by then, it is already gone. The first cost of living without restraint is loss of focus. Focus is not a talent. It is a condition. It exists only when attention is protected from constant interruption. Without restraint, attention becomes a shared resource, claimed by notifications, cravings, boredom, and emotional discomfort. The mind jumps from stimulus to stimulus, never staying long enough to build depth. And depth is where meaning is formed. Without depth, everything feels shallow. Even success, even pleasure. This is why many people feel strangely empty despite constant stimulation. Their minds are always occupied but never engaged. The second cost is emotional volatility. Restraint is not suppression. It is regulation. When impulses govern behavior, emotions lose their stabilizing framework. Desire becomes urgency. Frustration becomes anger. Discomfort becomes avoidance. Instead of being processed, emotions are acted out or escaped from. This creates a nervous system that is constantly reactive. Small problems feel overwhelming. Minor setbacks feel personal. Waiting feels unbearable. Psychologically, this is not sensitivity, it is dysregulation. And dysregulated minds seek relief, not resolution. Which leads to the third cost, dependency. Without restraint, the brain begins to rely on external stimuli to regulate internal states. Pleasure becomes medicine. Distraction becomes coping. Consumption becomes comfort. This dependency does not always look extreme. Often, it hides behind productivity, entertainment, or social interaction. But the pattern is the same. When discomfort arises, something must immediately remove it. And over time, the capacity to sit with difficulty erodes. This is crucial because every meaningful achievement, intellectual, emotional, or personal, requires the ability to tolerate discomfort without escape. Without restraint, discomfort becomes intolerable. And when discomfort is intolerable, growth becomes impossible. Another cost is loss of self-trust. Every time you tell yourself you will do something and fail to follow through, a small fracture forms. At first, it is barely noticeable, but repeated enough times, the mind internalizes a belief that your intentions are unreliable. This erodes confidence at a deep level. Not confidence in ability, but confidence in identity. You begin to doubt your own resolve. You stop setting meaningful goals because some part of you expects to abandon them. This creates a quiet resignation that masquerades as realism. I'm just not that disciplined. This is how I am. It's not a big deal. But psychologically, this is learned helplessness. And learned helplessness does not come from lack of talent. It comes from repeated surrender to impulse. There is also a social cost. People unconsciously read restraint as stability. Those who lack it are perceived, often subtly, as unpredictable, unreliable, or emotionally driven. Not because they are bad people, but because their behavior lacks consistency. Consistency is the foundation of trust, and trust is the foundation of respect. Without restraint, reactions vary based on mood, desire, or convenience. Over time, others learn not to rely on you even if they like you. This affects relationships, leadership, and authority. Not dramatically, gradually. Another cost is identity fragmentation. Restraint is what allows values to override impulses. Without it, values become aspirational rather than operational. You believe certain things matter, but your behavior reflects something else. This internal contradiction creates cognitive dissonance. And the mind resolves dissonance in one of two ways: by changing behavior or by changing beliefs. Most people choose the second. They lower standards. They rationalize actions. They redefine values to match behavior. This is how character erodes quietly. Not through major betrayals, but through small justifications. Psychologically, this leads to a diluted sense of self. You are no longer sure who you are, only what you feel like doing. And that uncertainty is exhausting. Without restraint, time perception also changes. Short-term gratification becomes the dominant frame. Long-term consequences feel abstract and distant. This is because restraint is what links present action to future identity. Without it, the future feels disconnected from the present. And when the future feels unreal, responsibility weakens. This is why impulsive behavior often coexists with anxiety. The mind senses that something is being neglected but cannot articulate what. Another critical cost is reduced cognitive endurance. Restraint trains the brain to sustain effort. Without it, mental stamina declines. Tasks that require prolonged attention feel unbearable. Learning becomes difficult. Reading feels tiring. Silence feels uncomfortable. This is not laziness. It is a nervous system conditioned to constant stimulation. The brain adapts to whatever environment it is given. And without restraint, the environment becomes chaotic. There is also a philosophical cost. Without restraint, life becomes reactive rather than intentional. You respond rather than choose. You consume rather than create. You drift rather than direct. This does not feel tragic in the moment. Feels easy, but ease without direction leads to stagnation, and stagnation leads to quiet dissatisfaction. Many people mistake this dissatisfaction for depression or lack of motivation, but often it is the psychological consequence of living without self-restraint. The mind knows it is capable of more, and it suffers when that capacity isn't used. Self-restraint is not about rejecting pleasure. It is about prioritizing meaning over immediacy. Without it, pleasure loses its contrast. Everything becomes flat, even joy. The final cost is loss of inner authority. Authority begins internally. If you cannot govern your own impulses, your words carry less weight, even to yourself. This is why restraint has always been associated with leadership, wisdom, and maturity across cultures. Not because restraint is impressive, but because it is rare. Living without restraint does not make someone immoral. It makes them ungoverned. And an ungoverned mind is always vulnerable to distraction, manipulation, and regret. The solution is not extreme denial. It is deliberate control, small acts of refusal, intentional pauses, moments where desire is observed rather than obeyed. This rebuilds the hierarchy of the mind, conscious intention above impulse. That is the true function of self-restraint, not to limit life but to restore authorship. When restraint returns, focus stabilizes, emotions regulate, confidence rebuilds, not overnight, but permanently, and perhaps the most important shift occurs quietly. You stop negotiating with yourself. You say what you will do and you do it. And that is when life stops feeling scattered, because the mind finally remembers who is in charge. When restraint begins to return, the mind reacts before it stabilizes. This part is rarely discussed. The early phase of restraint does not feel empowering. It feels uncomfortable, restless, even frustrating, and many quit quit here because the brain has adapted to immediate relief. When that relief is delayed, the nervous system interprets it as threat. This is why the absence of restraint feels like freedom at first, and the presence of restraint feels like loss. But psychologically, this is a misinterpretation. What the brain is actually experiencing is withdrawal from stimulation. Modern neuroscience shows that frequent gratification reduces baseline dopamine sensitivity. This means the brain requires more stimulation to feel the same level of satisfaction. Without restraint, this escalates. More stimulation, more novelty, more intensity. And when restraint is introduced, the brain resists because it has been trained to expect constant reward. This resistance is not weakness. It is conditioning. Understanding this is essential because it prevents self-blame. People often interpret early discomfort as proof that restraint doesn't suit them. In reality, it is proof that restraint is working. The brain is recalibrating, and recalibration always feels like loss before it feels like clarity. Another subtle cost of living without restraint is distorted self-perception. Without restraint, People often mistake impulse-driven behavior for authenticity. I'm just being myself. I follow my feelings. I don't suppress who I am. But psychologically, impulses are not identity. They are signals. Signals shaped by environment, habit, stress, and reward history. When impulses dominate behavior, identity becomes unstable. You are not choosing who you are. You are reacting to what feels strongest in the moment. This leads to a fragmented sense of self. Different behaviors in different contexts. Different values depending on mood. Different standards depending on convenience. Over time, this inconsistency creates internal friction. You feel divided, not because you are complex, but because there is no central authority within. Restraint restores that authority. It allows you to decide which impulses deserve action and which deserve observation. This distinction is the foundation of psychological maturity. Another long-term cost of unrestrained living is weakened decision-making. Every decision requires cognitive energy. When impulses constantly interrupt attention, decision fatigue increases. The mind becomes overwhelmed not by complexity, but by volume. Too many stimuli, too many choices, too many micro-decisions. This is why people without restraint often feel mentally exhausted despite doing very little that is meaningful. Their cognitive resources are depleted by constant switching. Restraint reduces this noise. By limiting unnecessary inputs, the brain regains decisional clarity. This is why disciplined individuals often appear calm. Not because they have fewer problems, but because their minds are not cluttered by irrelevant demands. There is also a moral illusion attached to restraint. Many believe that living without restraint is a form of honesty, and restraint is repression. But repression involves denial without understanding. Restraint involves awareness with choice. Repression pushes impulses into the unconscious. Restraint keeps them in consciousness without obedience. This distinction matters because unacknowledged impulses tend to express themselves destructively. Observed impulses lose their power. Restraint is observation before action, and observation weakens compulsion. Another overlooked cost of lacking restraint is reduced tolerance for boredom. Boredom is not emptiness. It is the mind without immediate stimulation. Without restraint, boredom feels unbearable. With restraint, boredom becomes a gateway. It allows deeper thoughts to surface, creativity to emerge, self-reflection to occur. Most meaningful insights arise not during stimulation, but during quiet mental space. Without restraint, that space never appears. This is why many people feel disconnected from purpose. Their minds are never still long enough to listen. Self-restraint also alters how the mind relates to time. Without it, time feels rushed, urgent, always slipping away. With restraint, time feels deliberate. Moments stretch. Attention anchors. This shift alone reduces anxiety significantly. Anxiety often arises not from danger, but from uncontrolled mental momentum. Restraint slows that momentum, creates psychological braking. This is why restraint is calming, not constricting. Another critical aspect is desire inflation. When desire is continuously satisfied without resistance, its threshold increases. What once satisfied no longer does. This leads to chronic dissatisfaction, not because pleasure is absent, but because pleasure has lost contrast. Restraint restores contrast. It makes pleasure meaningful again. This is why disciplined individuals often experience joy more intensely, not because they indulge more, but because they indulge selectively. There is also a social illusion worth addressing. People often believe that restraint makes them less relatable. In reality, it makes them more respected. Not immediately, but consistently. Restraint creates predictability. Predictability creates trust. Trust creates influence. Influence creates quiet power. This power does not demand attention. It attracts it. Another consequence of restraint is identity consolidation. When actions align with values repeatedly, the mind stops questioning itself. You know who you are. This reduces internal conflict. And internal peace is not passive. It is stabilizing. A stable mind makes better decisions, forms healthier relationships, responds rather than reacts. This stability is rare in modern life, and rarity creates value. Perhaps the most misunderstood aspect of restraint is its relationship with freedom. Many believe freedom is the absence of limits. Psychologically, freedom is the ability to choose which limits matter. Without restraint, impulses choose for you. With restraint, you choose for yourself. That is freedom. The absence of restraint does not remove control. It transfers control to habit, environment, and stimulus. Restraint reclaims it. In the long term, people who practice restraint develop something subtle but powerful: self-command. They do not argue internally. They do not bargain with impulses. They do not need external pressure. They decide, and decision becomes action. This is why restraint often precedes leadership. Not because leaders deny themselves, but because leadership requires delayed gratification, emotional regulation, and consistency. Without restraint, leadership collapses under pressure. Finally, restraint changes how you experience yourself. You stop feeling fragmented. You stop feeling scattered. You stop feeling driven by invisible forces. And that shift alone is worth everything restraint demands. Because a mind that can pause, can choose, and a mind that can choose is no longer enslaved by impulse. Living without self-restraint does not ruin life instantly. It erodes it quietly. It replaces intention with reaction, meaning with stimulation, identity with habit. Restraint reverses that erosion, not through force, but through awareness. Teaches the mind to wait, to observe, to choose deliberately, and in doing so, it restores the most valuable psychological asset a person can have: inner authority. Not control over others, control over self. Because the moment you can govern your impulses, life stops pulling you in every direction. And for the first time, you move forward by choice,